Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Parallax Abstraction, and welcome to another episode of Retro Flashback, showcasing gaming's roots for a new generation. And we're diving back into Capcom Arcade Cabinet. Haven't done this for a little while now, so I figured it was time to do another couple of these games. Also, I've got a little bit of an excuse. I am pre-recording this episode and the next one about a week or so in advance because, well, I'm moving next week, and I'm not 100% sure when I'm going to be able to get my recording set up back together, and also when we're going to have internet at the new house. So I don't want to miss any episodes because I haven't yet. So I'm getting a couple of these done ahead of time, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to record for the other stuff. So we're just going to do a couple more Capcom Arcade Cabinet titles, but these are interesting ones to be sure. So what are we looking at in this episode? Well, this is a classic, isn't it? So this is Ghosts N Goblins. Now, obviously, this is probably most well known on the NES, and this would actually be a good opportunity to do one of my sort of double feature episodes, but really there's not enough of a difference for me to do that. This game is definitely, it's jankier on the NES, the frame rate's lower, the controls are a lot looser. But it looks very similar, sounds pretty similar, and it plays very, very similar as well. There's not a significant amount of difference between this version and the NES version, so I don't think we're going to do that. But this is one of Capcom's most famous titles, to be sure, and it's pretty good. Like most Capcom games of this era, it's pretty ridiculously hard. I mean, I can rarely ever get past the first level in this, even when I'm not doing commentary over it, so we'll see what happens here. But this is a really good platformer with some interesting mechanical design to it, and pretty good a little bit of humor in it, too, that always made people giggle at the time, which I think is what it's remembered for. So I'm going to play this in score attack just because, well, I want to see if I can hit a leaderboard position. My internet is acting a little weird right now, so if you do get any messages saying that Xbox Live is disconnected, forgive me. My ISP says they're working on it, so I don't know. It's up right now, though, so we'll see what happens. So the concept is pretty simple. You're on some kind of picnic or whatever. I don't know if you're on a picnic with your lady friend or if you're injured and she's supposed to be tending to you, but your armor's not on, so draw your own conclusion. I ain't going to draw them for you. But yeah, so you're out here doing that. And Evil Demon Dude comes down, grabs her, takes off. And you got to deal with it. So, very simple. 2-button game. You shoot and you jump. And so the game's basic idea is that it is an arcade game, so while you are trying to get through it, you are also playing for score. Like a lot of other titles of this ilk, it does throw a lot of enemies at you on kind of an unending basis. Control got stuck there. And you are on a timer, but you do have the ability, if you want, to sort of pace yourself and hold back and get sort of more fodder kills for points should you want. So you have that option, but it's also not necessary. And as you're seeing here, one of the funny bits about this, so you can actually take only 2 hits in this game per life. And the way the game demonstrates that to you is you start off in your full armor, which is, I gotta say, is pretty bloody useless armor. It doesn't protect you all that well. And when you get hit once, you lose your armor and you start running around in your underwear, which is always always pretty funny. I mean, that always made me giggle back in the day, and it still kind of makes me smile now. And then you get hit again after that, and you're dead. You turn to a pile of bones, and that's that. So there aren't actually a surprisingly few number of opportunities to get your armor back. It's not impossible, but it's very rare, so you definitely shouldn't count on it. And as you can see, there are different kinds of enemies. There are fodder enemies. There's also those damn birds and those sort of Venus flytraps that shoot. Oh shoot, I didn't want that. And then Venus flytrap things that shoot stuff at you. And the enemy variety in this game is actually quite significant, and that's where the challenge comes from, because these zombie guys are not all that bad, but later in the game, some of the enemies that you will deal with are truly nasty and can be very, very difficult to avoid. And you also saw another thing that was really, really interesting and innovative about this game at the time, which is that there are weapons in the game, weapon pickups. And the weapons, I can usually get by that guy no problem. And the weapon pickups are interesting. They vary quite a bit. Every weapon has different ranges, different levels of power, different functions. There's your lance, there's this torch thing, which actually a lot of people really don't like, but I actually like quite a bit. I find it can be pretty handy if you know what you're doing with it. Though it was definitely worse in the NES version. It was not as useful there. There's a dagger, and there's other ones I think I'm forgetting as well. But they all have different ranges, different amounts of damage they do, and different firing rates. So the dagger is the best if you want to fire rapidly. It doesn't do a lot of damage, but you can really spam it out almost as fast as you can press the button. The fire is extremely powerful, but has kind of a weird firing arc, and oh yeah, there we go. But it has kind of a weird firing arc, and it doesn't necessarily go very far, and you can't fire it a lot. Your starting spear, interestingly enough, is a weapon a lot of people prefer because it's very easy to keep track of. It does a fair amount of damage. It fires very quickly, and it's a lot of people just sort of prefer the starting weapon. They say it's easier. So as you can see here, this is one of the types of enemies in this game that can be quite nasty because they all fly at different altitudes. You kind of got to get used to that. These guys are also really mean too because some of them will come in too high for you to hit, and they also shoot those things, but you'll see here that they fly down, and they will stay on screen and fly down until they reach your level. And they can also drop spears down on you from the air as opposed to just shooting at you sideways, so they can be really nasty to avoid. And of course there's boss creatures. And yeah, the real challenge of this game, in my opinion, is the movement of your character, and that being that he doesn't run very fast. As you can see, he's got kind of a weak sauce jump, and that makes things really, really tricky. Because you want to try to move as fast as you can to try to sort of get through the level as quick as you can so that you can avoid future hazards, because the enemies, even the trickier ones like this, will just keep coming. Ah, bugger. I didn't want my thing back. That's where this game will screw you sometimes too, is you can't always avoid that. Let's see what we can do here. That boss is normally a lot harder than that. Take a key for coming in. Why, thank you. Yes, I will. That boss is normally harder than that. I don't know why he kind of was just stuck in a pattern there. You can cheese some of these bosses. And as you see, well, this is where stuff gets even more interesting, because now you're on a level with multiple platforms, different ways to ascend the level, and these little annoying buggers that can be a little tricky to hit, especially when you have a weapon with no actual firing arc. And which are really, really small and just really bloody annoying. I'm doing surprisingly well here, actually. I'm normally pretty bad at this game. I have not even come remotely close to finishing Ghosts N Goblins before. And you know what the amazing part is that this game is actually not the hardest of this type of game that Capcom has made. They actually made, what was it? Ghouls and Ghosts, which was a sort of 16-bit era, Genesis era, if you will, title in this series, which is even more brutal. It's a good game, but it's, it will just step on your throat and make you beg for mercy while it does it. I'm actually quite pleased with myself. I did very well on that run. That's better than I've ever done, and I'm really glad my internet's still up so I could file that to the leaderboards. Well, that was a good attempt. So let's go back to normal arcade mode so that you can actually see the proper title screen and whatnot here. And that's kind of the general idea of it. It can be a fairly long game because there are multiple levels, and I mean, you saw the level of challenge that I was running into there just trying to get through the first level and into the second level there. And that's the other thing with this that made this truly kind of utterly ridiculous, is that that was the other thing. You know, most arcade games offered continues, and this one, I mean, the way the checkpoints work in this game, there's only one checkpoint per level. So I mean, the way this game's checkpointed itself really made it difficult to progress. I mean, you know, with constant repeated play, you could certainly get better at it, and you know, eventually make your way through it. But I mean, I'll be honest with you, I'm just not a very patient person, and I never had the patience to get very far in this game. Even though I did own it on the NES, I think the furthest I ever got in this game was maybe the third level. And I've always wanted to sit down and watch a speed run of this game, because I bet I would love to see just how ridiculous some of these later levels got. But you can sort of see with some of the enemy designs and some of the enemy behaviors in this, you can see where this game has influenced other games. I would say titles like Magician Lord, which was a great Neo Geo game I will be covering one day, and even to a certain extent Castlevania, I think you could see having drawn some influences from this game, just in terms of how the enemies were put together and so some of their behaviors. I mean, you can certainly see similarities between these annoying buggers and the Medusa heads, the bloody Medusa heads from Castlevania. I definitely intend to cover Castlevania as well at some point. That is a series, well, I have some controversial opinions on Castlevania, but I'll save it for when I actually do cover that series. But this is a really good arcade platformer. It's funny because I normally don't like games that are this punishingly difficult. I think I've said that before, even in this very Capcom Arcade Cabinet series. I think I've said this before, but I don't normally care for games that are brutally difficult because, you know, I'm not very patient, and I just don't tend to have the tolerance for that. But this is a game that, despite how hard, and in many cases, especially with the way enemies spawn randomly, in many cases is unfair, like truly unfair. I never find myself getting mad at this game, and though I never get far in it, I always find myself still enjoying it, and you know, loading it up and being like, yeah, you know, I'm gonna have fun with this for a little while, and then just walk away when I kind of run out of patience, which is a very frequent thing. And here the game. See, that's what often makes that boss really challenging, is other than the fact that his pattern is normally a little more involved than it was when I ran into him, it's that you often have those things on screen with you at the same time, because they don't go away just because the boss shows up. No, that would be way too nice to you. So yeah, that's the basics of it. It's there's not a huge ton to say about this game. It you know, again, what I like about it is that it has, I wouldn't call its mechanics crazy deep, but there is more to take in with this game than a lot of arcade games. You know, there's multiple weapons, there's a different type of scoring system, there's multiple enemy behaviors, there's definitely some significant challenge to what it's trying to do, but it shows all this to you within about the first, I would say, minute, probably even closer to 30 seconds of play. You know, you get your first different weapon, you get your point pickups, you see enough different enemies to understand that there's going to be a lot of variation and a lot of challenge to what the game is showing you. Come down here, you little bugger. Ooh, oh, good. So I picked up the dagger here, so you get an idea of what that is right before I kick the bucket. And I really like the fact that, though the game is very, very difficult, and perhaps its difficulty curve is a little more, shall we say, cliff-like than it needs to be, it also has some fairly decent depth to its mechanics and systems, but it lays those out to you very early on, and within about a minute or so of playing it, you get what makes this game different from a lot of other titles, and what it expects of you, and how it's going to provide you a different experience, and in many ways how that can be to your benefit, how you can use the differences in the rules and whatnot that it offers to your advantage. And I think that's really cool. It's hard. It's, I dare say, a little bit mean, but it will reward repeated play. Eventually, you will learn the patterns of the tougher enemies. You will learn what weapons work best in what scenarios and what to try to fight for. And you will learn how to maximize its scoring system. So you really, it is a game that, you know, if you're willing to put in the time, and it will probably be a significant time, then you definitely can beat this simply by just practicing. And that's sort of the best way to design games like this, is just to reward extra play. And that I think, plus just the little bit of humor it puts in its design, you know, like the little bit with the underwear when you get hit, you know, that's something that it doesn't make any sense. There's no reason for it. You know, they didn't have to try like a modern video game would. They didn't have to try to write a narrative reason for why the things work like that. It's just like, hey, wouldn't it be funny if we gave the guy 2 hit points, and if the second hit point and if taking 1 hit resulted in him running around in his underwear, wouldn't that be funny? That was probably all the thought that went into that. And not a lot of games are designed that way anymore, with that level of simplicity. And yeah, it doesn't make any sense, but you know what? It's a bloody video game. It doesn't always have to make sense, and it doesn't always have to... There doesn't have to be some kind of canonical reason for everything. And I really like that they did that. This is a game that sort of wears everything about itself on its sleeve unashamedly, and makes no bones about what it is or what it's trying to do, but is also very good at showing you that if you're willing to put in the time, you can have a significant and meaningful experience with it. And I think that's why it was very popular, both in arcades and on home systems. It still holds up to this day. I mean, even when I'm sucking at it like this as I am now, it definitely still holds up to this day, and it could play a little bit better. Like, the controls are still a little bit mushy, and I do wish that your character had a bit better jumping. I find that the character that can't jump very well can be a really frustrating thing in video games. But it still plays really well, and you can easily figure it out, and it's still a lot of fun even to this day. I'm still terrible at it despite the hours I put in, but I really like it, and this is something I would definitely like to see if I can get further in at some point. But yeah, that is Ghosts N Goblins, published and developed by Capcom in 1985 for arcades. The NES version came out in 1986, and I'm trying to remember, it was actually not developed by Capcom. The NES version was developed by another company who went uncredited. I'm not sure, maybe it was Tosei? I don't remember. But it's good on there too. The frame rate is higher on this, and the controls are definitely tighter in the arcades, but the NES version is good as well. So you shouldn't have a hard time finding a copy of this game outside of Capcom Arcade Cabinet if you don't want to get it there. But I think this is definitely the way to play this game, and it's one of the better items in this collection, in my opinion. My name has been Parallax Abstraction. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.